Welcome to part 2 of episode 153 with Dr. Gale Pooley. We are going to conclude our conversation on economics and creativity and how to make a better world for those who come after us. I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. And I want to remind you right here, please, when you're watching this and you have questions, write them down, then put them in the comments section. I am going to look at them and compile them so that we have Dr. Pooley back as our guest, and he will answer your questions. And if you don't want to put them in the comments section, go to my website at livingintothetruth.org and leave me a comment there and tell me it's for episode 153. And we'll get some questions answered. I hope you enjoy part 2.
Human beings were created in the image of their creator, and they were given these fundamental rights by a creator, not the government: life, liberty, and this pursuit of happiness. And that pursuit of happiness, it not only includes my pursuit of being able to practice my beliefs the way I felt, my conscience was telling me, but it also meant this freedom of action in the economic world. I'm going to go out and try to make something, and I'm going to try to sell it. And maybe if I can't sell it, I'm going to keep working, and I'm going to continue to work on this until I can come up with this creation that's going to benefit everyone. So we've had this culture of creativity, freedom to create is really what I call it. Not only political freedom, but we had economic freedom. You put those two together and you get this powerful effect. And then if you have population, then it really grows. And people say, well, your model says that we need more people. Our model says you need more people with the freedom to innovate, because China had lots and lots of people. Mm-hmm. They had lots of people, but they didn't have any freedom. So when they just got a small measure of freedom in the late 1970s, early 1980s, suddenly they began to escape poverty. So it really, you have to have people that are free to innovate. And so that's where I think we've got to be able to think about that. And I feel badly because it needs to be said. So, we need to be reminded of this. And our current, candidates that are running for office, neither one of them really speak about a future America that really is open to creating new things that are valuable. And so much needs to be to be reminded of what we've done in the past and that we can move forward. So that would be my thought.
Okay. Now, tell me, a lot, like we just talked about, a lot of most of the college educated young adults coming out of these universities are they're really focused on socialism. Even the Christian young people are going to Acts 2, and I think it's not being looked at properly, but I can cover that another time. But do you have the same freedoms with socialism, and why? You work in a university. Why is this happening? Yeah. Tell us, what is the difference? What's better?
First of all, you've got to remember that most university faculty, they never left the classroom. They were students, and then they became professors. So they've lived in this world of ideas, and ideas that they never had to really be personally accountable for those ideas. And socialism, the ideology of socialism, the ideas, the claims that socialism makes, the theoretical claims that they make, that, wow, wouldn't it be nice if we could live in a world where everyone shared and that everyone was equal and we all had all of our needs met for us? Wouldn't it be nice if we could live in a world like that? And most people say, yes, it would be nice. It would be nice. But then the question is, well, what do you have to do in order to try to achieve that objective? Well, it means that we're going to have an individual or a small group of people decide for everyone else. In other words, you don't own you. Someone else now owns you. Someone else decides what you're going to get. Someone else decides what you're going to do with your life. And those decisions now become someone else gets to make those decisions, because if they're not given that power, then they cannot achieve this utopian world of everyone having this equality. And, in the early 1900s, people could make those claims, and you could say, okay, well, that theory's interesting. Has it ever been tried? Well, let's try it. And we tried it in the Soviet Union. We tried it in China. We tried it in many of these other countries. We're still trying it today in some countries. We've got over 100 million deaths as a consequence of this ideology. But this ideology, once again, has so much power because people are drawn to this idea that we could have more equality and more justice. And that idea then is then compared to the reality of capitalism. And the reality of capitalism is, there are rich people, there are people that are not rich. And you have this difference in income. And it doesn't seem like it's fair. And then the question is, well, you want to compare this utopia of socialism against the reality of capitalism. If you compare any system against utopia, you're always going to lose. And the unfortunate thing that we have today is that faculty, for the most part, have lived in this world of theory. They've never really had to deal with reality in terms of, have you started a business? Have you tried to create a wealth for another person? Have you failed in your business? Have you learned from these mistakes? Or can you continue to advance these ideas about social justice without consequence? Now, the beauty of this bet, this original bet between Julian Simon and Paul Ehrlich, was that he held Ehrlich to account. Ehrlich had to pay for his mistake, but that is so rare in academia. When's the last time someone in academia made a proposal about something and then was held accountable for the consequences of that proposal? So never ever, one thing we say in economics, never ever put someone in charge of making a decision that does not have to personally pay for the cost of being wrong. And university professors never ever have to pay that cost. And so they can go off on these tangents of theory and never really have to deal with, well, what did that idea actually do when it took effect? How did it really affect people's lives? What lives were destroyed? What did you have to take away from people in order to achieve this idea that you're going to achieve justice? Well, many people, you take their freedom away from them, you take their property away from them, you take their lives away from them. And it's a terrible thing. And I think as Americans, we're starting to see this, I sense, and there are some alternatives that are emerging that, this idea of I've got to send my kids to this best college I can get them into. And 4 years later, they're going to come out and they and I are going to have debt, but they're going to come out with a completely different set of ideas. And those ideas may not be the ideas and the values that we have. And those ideas are actually going to be very dangerous to them and everyone around them if they are really fully implemented in order to achieve those utopian objectives.
Well, I feel like we're on the precipice of that right now. This has been going on in colleges and universities for so long. I feel like the people, the individuals who are actually out there are trying to push this socialism. And it's an ideology, like you say. We should feel guilty because our grandparents or our parents worked really hard and saved money and we're not just sitting around waiting for government handouts, and we're supposed to feel guilty for that. I've been asked those questions myself, and that's why I'm bringing it to you, a professional. My undergraduate was in economics, BS in economics, and I loved it, and I still look at it, but you've been doing this your whole career.
Here's the other thought is I think you have to remember that academia today is it's a brand, and it's very status driven. And, people still have this sense that, look, if I could get my children into this really, really good school that has this high status, that it's going to mean their life is going to be good. And the left, the progressives, understand that, and that's why they were very, very strategic about capturing these institutions. And once they're captured, it's like you never really are going to get those people to reform. Once they own the faculty and the administration at Harvard and at Yale and at these, UC Berkeley, it's like, you really think that they're going to change? No. And that's why today I think as parents and grandparents, we've got to be able to say, you need to think really hard about where you're going to go to university and what you're going to study, and be prepared to look at an alternative that may not be traditional, may not have the same brand status as an Ivy League school, but you're going to come out of that institution with much better skills and a worldview that's going to be much, much clearer. Hillsdale, for example, you look at that, you get a little tiny Hillsdale, got 1,200 or 1,500 students, and you come out of there, it's like, I'm going to be pretty confident that when my child comes out of there, they're going to know some true economics, they're going to know some true history, and they're not going to be just given one side and be indoctrinated. They're really going to go there and learn how to think. And that's what traditional universities were. You go there, you're given these different perspectives, and you're taught how to think instead of what to think. And I just and then you add to that the debt. It's like you come out woke and you come out with a huge debt. It's like, this is really bad, because that debt has also had this really harmful effect on family formation. I can't afford to have kids because I got this student loan to pay for. Getting a house is going to be hard. You really want 22-year-olds having $100,000 in debt that's not really collateral that they can sell? It's like you've saddled these kids for the next 20 years. That's going to affect their ability to create a life with a family. So, and then you add the ideology to it. It's like, this is terrible from two dimensions. So I think, look, we're Americans. We if we're given the freedom to innovate, we'll be able to work our way through this. And there's going to be new creations. I think there are new universities, there's new colleges, there's new ways to think about how do we actually, educate the next generation. Can we use the technology? Can we use the internet? Can we use AI to do this thing? Can we lower the costs and also remove the wokeism out of the curriculum, so you can get an education, you can be employable, you've got skills and knowledge, you don't have this huge debt, and you don't have this ideology that's also affected the way that you treat other people. And this ideology, once again, it putting us into categories, black, white, male, female, all these categories, and then judging people by those categories, that is a terrible way. That's how wars start, when we become tribes. And it's a tribalism that it has, and then you add the justice to it, and it's like you come out of there and I just look at some of these students and I think, why would someone want to hire you? Why would someone want to hire you? Because it sounds like you are a lawsuit. Wow. You're going to find some reason to sue this company over something. It's like, no, you've got to create value.
That's such a good point. I had not even thought of that end of it as an employer hiring someone who's just looking for that divisive nature. It's like that intersectionality
right.
that we're going through now. which is a Marxist ideology
Right.
in order to turn people against each other.
Yeah, this obsession with power, the power dynamics, the oppressor, the victim. And if you believe and you look at the world, and everywhere you look, you see oppression and you see victims, and it becomes this power thing, it's like, this is going to turn out very badly for you and everyone else, because now you are not devoting your time and your talents toward creation. You're devoting your time and talents toward this thing, this theoretical idea of social justice, which is not going to allow you to really create value for anybody. And it's a terrible infection that we suffer from now. I call it this virus of wokeism. And I think the antidote, once again, is being able to return again to these fundamental ideas. Who are you as a human being? Are you an individual that should be responsible for your choices and the consequences of those choices? Do you want to be judged as an individual human being? And then, do you want the freedom to be able to pursue your gifts and talents and ideas? Those are right in our declaration. I mean, we've had them for 220 years now, almost 250 years, right?
Almost.
Yeah, and I think part of what we've got to do is we've got to have this restoration of these ideas that really are what made this place great, because it was free and it was a place where people could really have the freedom to pursue their creative talents, and that we looked upon other people. We don't value envy. We don't tend to think about, we're not generally envious in this country. You go to other places on the planet and it's all about envy. It's all about envy. And that's been one of the features of Americanism that's allowed us to be so creative, is when we see somebody else that's achieved something, it's like, well, how did they do that? I got to learn what they did. Will they tell me how to do that? Can I learn how to do that so I can achieve what they've achieved? In some places, you look at, people look at other people, when they have more, it's like, we want to take that away. And envy is actually worse than greed, because greed is, I want what you have. Envy is, I don't want you to have it. I'm going to destroy that thing because I don't want you to have it. And so being able to move beyond this idea of, we cannot let ourselves be overcome by envy. It's going to tear us apart and it's going to destroy us. I think Robert Kennedy Jr., when he talks about, we got to love our children more than when we hate each other. It's like, we have got to be able to think about what kind of world we're creating for our children. Are they going to be in a world where they really can be treated individually based on their individual gifts and talents and their character? Or are we going to put everybody in these categories, this sectionality? You're in this section, you're in that section. Do we really want a place like that?
That's also not that's not biblical, and that's what surprises me, that many professing Christians don't see that that's what they're doing, that they're participating in just this, I don't know, this ideology. I have to go back to ideologies, philosophy,
right,
of oppressor, oppressor views. It's almost as if they're not well enough read to understand exactly what.
So social justice, that ideology is very seductive, especially when you can match it up. Well, this is really Christianity. Christianity also believes in social justice. Well, does it really? Or does it treat everybody as individuals? I think, we can look, and this new book by Megan Basham, The Shepherds for Sale, where she describes how the leaders of many of our Christian institutions have been captured by this ideology, because it is so seductive in terms of thinking, wow, I'm going to make the world a better place if we have more justice. And we know that the ultimate justice, the ultimate justice is not going to be imposed politically. It's a divine justice. And when we recognize that, and then recognize what we do in that world where justice can never really be total and complete, especially if it's imposed by human beings on other human beings, that the justice really is, do we have this equality of opportunity? Are you going to treat everyone equal in terms of giving them their full measure and benefit to be able to be fully human and fully creative? Or are you going to, at their birth, put them in a category and say, you're this group, you are the oppressors, or you're this group, you're the victims? You know, the tragedy with this victim ideology is I've seen my students that have come with these great hopes of being able to do something with their lives, and they take a couple of classes and they suddenly now think that they're a victim. And it's like, what are you going to do with your life? Victims don't create. Victims, you're going to have a life now that is not going to be able to produce much of value, and you had this potential. So it's just tragic to witness that in the lives of our young students, and then to be told when you're born that you're in this oppressor class. It's like, well, you were an oppressor. It's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Because of my gender or my race, I'm an oppressor? Oh, who have I oppressed? Right. Oh, well, it's your class that's oppressed. Well, I'm part of a class. So it's a terrible thing, and I think we've got to go, back, or we go forward to this restoration of these, and I call them eternal or divine principles of what we are as human beings, and how we should treat one another. And it begins with, we have this dignity, and we also have these rights that were given to us by our Creator to be like Him, and as an individual.
Yes, and we only get that from an understanding that there is a God. And I heard Bhavik Ramaswamy. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. You probably have. You're very well educated.
Yeah.
And he's coming out with a new book. And one of the very first 10 points that he makes is, there is a creator God. There's a God. And even though he's a Hindu, if he recognizes that there's a God, then we answer to something higher up.
Right.
Then I think our understanding of who that God is comes by searching and seeking, obviously.
Right.
So I think that's the most important thing, is to understand there's a God.
Right.
And there will be justice, and there will be divine justice.
Right.
Going back to this socialist and capitalism debate, and I was flat out asked one time by somebody, and I won't say who, but they asked me if I thought God was a capitalist, or is God a socialist? And I wanted to sit down with this individual, but I was in the middle of cooking dinner and trying to get everything out on the table. And so it's just not the time to start talking about these things. As a theologian,
I think you were the capitalist actually creating the value, and somebody was waiting for you to produce that, maybe, right?
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
So that kind of do you have time to talk about that a little bit?
Let me just do a real simple thing for you that I like to use. Does God believe in persuasion or compulsion? Who believes in persuasion, and who believes in compulsion? And I got to believe that the true and living God, first of all, He loves us, and He's given us this ability to make choices. He's given us this freedom to make choices, and He will use persuasion to try to encourage us to make good choices. On the other hand, The adversary uses compulsion. It's force. It's, you must do this. I'm going to make the choice for you. You're not going to make the choice. So the degree to which these policies are based on compulsion or persuasion, I really see those two things as being able to say, do you really want a God that believes in compulsion? And that's really what socialism is you're going to be forced to do these things against your will. And you're going to be told that you're going to be happier if you forfeit your freedoms and your rights to a group of people or an individual to make your decisions for you. And that person is going to use compulsion. They're going to use the force of violence against you if you don't agree with them. And so in my mind, it's very clear what that Christian God is he's a God of love, which says, I will use persuasion. I will never resort to compulsion, to compelling you to do this thing. I want you to follow me out of your own choice, out of your own free will. And, when we think about governments and think that governments are this extension of, we create these governments, but governments also have this effect on us. We know that government has to have these powers to enforce law, but then as our founder said, I think it was Madison, we've got to give them the power, but then we have to have the power to check their power. How do we do that? So they're not tempted by this easy route of compulsion over persuasion. The whole COVID thing, I think we could look back at that and say, what I wish our government would have done is said, look, here's the risks, and here's all of the people that are studying this, and here's what they've said. You, American citizen, you need to decide what you should do here. What kind of risks that you're willing to expose yourself to and other people around you, you need to make this decision. Instead, it's almost like we were panicked. And panic and crisis are always the pretext for the destruction of human freedom. We want to suspend the Constitution over a virus. It happened just like that. Yeah. So being able to help people understand, look, here's the proper role of government. We do recognize they have to have this power to enforce law, but we also have to recognize that if we can use persuasion and information and transparency, that's the route that we should go. We should expect our governments to be transparent and try to be as truthful as possible with us and let us decide. After all, we were the ones that decided to vote for them.
Yes.
I'm going to trust you to vote, but I'm not going to trust you to make a medical decision. How does that make sense?
Right. And I don't think people were thinking, but like I think you mentioned towards the beginning of the program, that the media has a lot of effect on people. And what we see and hear, we can start thinking in a different way if we don't have all the facts. And
well, the other great strength that America had is we had this competition. We had competition between governments. Within the government, we've got three branches of government. And then we had the state government and the federal government. We had created this. We had created these rules where we knew that power needed to be separated, that we could create a system where there was competition, and that competition would yield more truth and more freedom for people. And we also believe this was true in media and academia and all these other institutions. And what you've seen over the last 20 years is all these institutions have really coalesced with one another. And so you have one government, one media, and one academia, and they're all now, they don't compete with each other. They all have this uniform power that they exercise. And that's very, very dangerous because now you think about the media. Do you really hear different views on things from journalists. It's like, no, these guys have left. They've left journalism and they've become advocates of a position. And you get people that talk. I mean, you tune in, it's like these news shows it's just 5 people talking, and they all kind of have this agenda. And it's like, where can I go to really get news, facts about things? So, I mean, the internet has been fantastic for that, but look what's happened, with it over the last 5 years, where you've had this threat of censorship by governments that have done what? They've really reduced the freedom that we had to be able to discover truth and share it with other people, because now we get this censorship problem. I mean, Elon Musk, he really saved the First Amendment for us. And we'll see, how much, I mean, he did this temporary save. Let's see how much longer it's going to last.
Yeah.
When governments join up with media and join up with these large in academia and in the cultural, the Hollywood culture, when they all become one, the people are going to suffer. We're going to suffer under this tyranny of one worldview that seeks to impose itself by force on the rest of us.
Well, that's what's happening.
I don't want to get off on. I don't want you to feel like and I think the message of our book is. Yeah, the message of our book is, look, we've got lots and lots of problems in this country, but we've had bigger problems. We really have had bigger problems that we've been able to work our way through, and we can work our way through this. And we do have the resources to be able to create the kinds of energy that we need. We do have, the material resources to do that. What we need is the ethic and the will to be able to move forward in a way that really advances humanity. We really need to think about, how do we create a world where the future, where people have more freedom to create and more ability to be able to share what they've learned with everyone else, and not be constrained by governments or be forced or compelled into just only believing or only thinking something and not being able to speak or create, because speaking really is creating. When you limit someone's ability to speak, you limit their ability to really think. Like Jordan Peterson says, you don't want to stop people from thinking, because you'll stop everything.
Well, yes, and if you can't gather, if you can't exchange ideas, which I think I was listening, of course, to another podcast about. And this is where I get my information. You're right about the media. I mean, it's, to those who know, it's well known. There's one source, comes down the wire, they distribute it like 4 a.m. in the morning, is what I've heard. And all the media outlets get the same news. And they all.
What's so bizarre is they all use the same word too.
Same words.
It's like they all say the word joy together. So how did you all come up with that word together? How did you all come up with that word together? And yeah, so we've got some people that are engaged in this fight for freedom. That I mean, you listen to Senator Rand Paul, you read his books, and it's like, wow, he seems to be very bold about speaking the truth, and we've got to be able to support those individuals who are, let's hear what you think's happening. And I may not agree with everything you're saying, but I've got to have a reason to not agree. I can't just say I don't agree. It's like, well, why don't you agree? Think through this thing. Let's get back to helping our young people learn to really think through these problems, these questions before them. How do you really think about this? And then as you talk, speech is so important, because a lot of times when you're talking, you realize I don't make sense. Or when when you're talking to somebody and they can help you understand, that actually doesn't make sense. We've got to be open to thinking, and part of that is can we change our minds if we're given more evidence. And we make these kind of what I call metaphysical commitments to things. Sometimes we've got to be willing to relax those commitments and say, maybe I could be wrong about this. And let me think about it more. Let me think about it more and talk about it more and see what happens. And back to our book, it really was this Julian Simon guy that said, what you're saying in this book, what you said in this book, Paul, are like, the theory sounds like, yeah, we're in trouble, but the facts said something else. And as I think more about it, I realize that what you're saying is not true, that this is not going to happen, that what's going to happen is if people are free, they will be able to lift themselves out of poverty through capitalism.
Yes. And there is a bad side to capitalism, just like everything else. The minute you lose the ethics of understanding who God is, a creator God, and seeing the dignity of life in other human beings, is crony capitalism. And
right. I always tell people it's not crony capitalism, it's crony socialism.
Tell us, do you have time? I know it's been a while, but I would love to hear what you have to say.
Well, there's two ways to make profits. You can make profits in the market, and you can make profits politically. And when a company turns from the market to the political sector to make their profits, they're really turning away from capitalism towards socialism. So to call that activity crony capitalism, it's not crony capitalism, it's crony socialism. You are now using the political process to be able to grow your profits. You're no longer trusting your customers. Now, the beauty of capitalism was that we had this idea that everybody had this freedom to compete. Competition is really what capitalism was about. We all rise because people are willing to compete with each other. Socialism completely takes that away because now you're going to let the government pick who the winner is. And you're going to lose all the benefits of competition. You're going to lose all the benefits of Steve Jobs trying to figure out how to make a product that people are going to value. And you look at what his life was like, and he'd had all of these series of products, but he continually tried to come up with new innovations, new ideas, and new products, and that was a consequence of competitive capitalism. I just really call it, we use the word capitalism, but it's really free market entrepreneurship, where you have a free market, you have entrepreneurs, and they have property rights, and they can have contracts, and then it's like, okay, let's go see what you can do with and it's time to compete. Let's have a competition. And that yields all of this growth, all of this prosperity that we enjoy around us is a consequence of capitalistic competition. It's not due to socialistic, bureaucratic government. We're going to pick the winner. We're going to pick the winner. And everybody else, you no longer have the opportunity. We're going to subsidize you, and we're going to pick the winner. Why would we think that a bureaucrat or a politician is better at choosing what you want in your life than you are? Why would you think someone else would be better than you are at really knowing what your needs are and what's really important to you? Unless you think that you're not capable of making that decision.
And then who told you that?
Yeah, and what did you have to give up? And the thing about academics and their theories, my observation, is they can become true believers in these theories about social justice and socialism because they believe that they are going to be the ones that impose that system on everyone else. They're not going to be subject to those rules. They're going to be the rule makers. They get to choose who the winners are. They're not going to be the common people that have to lose their rights and their freedoms to be able to enjoy their life. It's going to be governments and their agents, and they believe themselves to be part of that vanguard, and you look at people who have always been in favor, the intellectual class that's been in favor of socialism, and it was always because they believed themselves to be part of that ruling class that were going to enjoy this benefits of rule, not the common people. And then the reality is many of those people, they were the first ones to be slaughtered by the tyrants who were able to impose socialism and Marxism on countries.
Yeah, once the useful idiots, that's kind of mean, but that's what they see them as, have developed this mindset,
right,
and moved everyone to that position, then they do away with those individuals who participated in that. That's, to me, Dr. Pooley, that's demonic, and that is not of God, to put people in positions.
right.
And so I just can't see where people get lost in the thought. I think it's a short-term thought process of, well, then it will be more fair. Well, no, because who's pulling the strings? And then we have to look at that. I could talk to you for so much longer, but I know you're busy and you need to probably get on to other things.
Well, you know what? Why don't you put this out on your network and see what kind of questions you get back, and we could probably have a follow-up and try to answer some of the questions your audience has.
I would love that. I will suggest that, and ask people to make comments down at the bottom, where there's a space at the bottom, and then we'll come back and have some questions for you from the audience and from all different walks. So I guess I'll have to come up with an interesting title so that people will watch it to the very end. But I thank you so much. Can you tell us where people can find you and how they will be able to buy your new book?
All of our stuff about our book is just at superabundance.com. If you can go to that site, that got a bunch of other interviews and reviews of the books and clips about the books and little videos about the books. And then you can just buy the book at Amazon. Go to Amazon and look for Superabundance, and you'll find our book there. And we've actually got we've got some other things that are going to be happening this next year that I think are going to be really exciting. When you're dealing with this world of ideas, the left has been very clever, just very, very smart about the way that they have approached the culture, and their ideas show up. They show up in kindergarten, and you go to California schools today, and you will get an ideology, a worldview day one when you go to school. So, our book is really kind of this academic book. It's a scholarly book. What we're hopeful going forward is that we can create some things that young people will be able to understand and enjoy, that will help them to be able to have this perspective of, look, resources, it's knowledge, not atoms, and it's abundance, not scarcity. If you can move from this world of thinking in atoms and thinking in scarcity to thinking in a world of knowledge and abundance, you get this totally different perspective about where we've been and where we could go in the future. And young people, if they're able to adopt that perspective and hold it throughout their lives, they're going to become creators, not victims. And that's really kind of my hope and prayer, is to have that effect potentially on the culture in such a way where we can move beyond this power thing and move to a creative thing. It's about creativity, not power.
Yes. And I think that would be brilliant to have books like that young people at their level of reading could really get into. I've always been an innovator. I created a cardboard box soda machine.
Yeah.
And instead of the lemonade stand, it was a little more interesting for people to walk up to.
Yeah.
Who knows? Like you say, who knows where the mind goes, because God
Yeah.
has given us this beautiful ability to think and create.
Right.
And it's a gift. It's truly a gift, and anyone who wants to take that away from a human, that is a crime. That's a crime. I can't.
Yeah, it is a crime to deprive someone of the oxygen of creativity because you think there's too many people or something like that. It's false. It's not just false. It really is an evil that is consuming much of our people's lives on the earth today. It's terrible.
It is terrible. Well, I'm excited. Please, if you've watched this whole show, please write comments, questions for Dr. Pooley, and we'll get him back here and we will ask those questions and give him a chance to answer them for you. As you can see, he can talk about just about anything. So that's fascinating. You're a breath of fresh air, Dr. Pooley. Thank you so much for what you do and for being on the show.
All right, my pleasure.
All right.